All right. Well, we're about 30 seconds early, but we'll call the Newcastle Planning Board meeting to order on April 16th, 2026 at 6:30. We need to review the minutes from our March 19th, 2025.
Yeah, I just was noticing that is incorrect. It's 2026.
Okay, great.
I was just thinking to myself the other day, I've been so good about switching to 2026 from the new year, but
Jinxed yourself.
yeah.
I mean, I read them, I just didn't catch that until right this
Yeah.
second. Do I have a motion on the minutes? Thank you. Do I have a second?
Sorry.
They were pretty short and sweet. Any further discussion, comments, corrections other than the date? None? All in favor? Right,
That's at 5 and
I wasn't here.
One abstention. Thank you. All right. Seeing no old business, we'll move right into new business. Item A, map 002 lot 053. 976 US Route 1, Dalton, pre-application meeting. Come on up, guys.
Get my hot seat warm.
Yes.
Yes.
But this is the second time we've seen you. So give us a breakdown of what you've done since we saw you last and.
Under your suggestion, we went to the appeals board and tried to get a variance on the setbacks and only met 2 of their 4 criteria, so.
Okay. All right. So now we're back here thinking to change things around. All we got were maps in the packet. Michael, do you have a little bit more?
so I shared those 2 maps, and before I started having Mr. Dalton go through putting together a whole application, I figured I would bring it back to the planning board to see if there was if there was any there in terms of my thinking is that possibly if he wants to remove his garage and rebuild a building in its place, and builds it further away from because his garage is currently non-conforming, and he wants to build it further, move it back away from the road, not into the shoreland.
Yep.
That he would be able to he basically would be reducing an existing nonconformity. He would not, the shoreline wouldn't be an issue, it's not in it.
No.
And that may be a way to get a greenhouse is what he's trying to build, without breaking any rules and going through the variance process. So I wanted to throw that idea out there at you all, and not that you have to say yes, no, and I think you probably want to wait until you actually get an application and look at it to say, yes, we this is good, but
Of course.
is it worth continuing forward and bringing an application? Does it pass the straight face test today?
All right, so that's a great question. Remind me what district this is in?
Rural
highway?
Yeah, and the existing setback or the required setback is 200 feet, I think,
From the center line.
from the center line.
So is that what makes the garage non-conforming? It's not back far enough?
Yes, it's too close to the.
Both the house.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, isn't
They're
there
both-
one
yeah,
that the
that's-
sandwich one?
Yes, they're overlap setbacks. Yeah.
So, and just for maybe a little bit more context, when this went to the appeals board to seek a variance, and it wasn't a variance of, they weren't appealing a decision, they were looking for a variance because on its face, it couldn't meet the core zoning code setback or the shoreline zoning setback.
Yeah.
And so I don't think there's any way, there isn't any nonconformity, at least that I can see, with the shoreline zoning, so there's no way to use that to the applicant's advantage, but the fact that there is a legally existing non-conforming building existing.
Mhm.
And the problem with the garage, the non-conformity is not that it's too big, or that there's too many buildings or anything like that. It is simply that it is too close to the road. I think it is measured from the center line, but
So the core zoning code district actually overlaps the shoreland setback?
It does,
Do you remember?
yeah.
Do you remember?
I
just don't remember by how much.
Yeah.
It's
50 feet maybe,
First thing.
Really?
50, 60 feet
Yeah.
overlap.
That was the map that I had shared this one with.
Oh, that's
everybody.
the one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was looking at the other one.
But just to be clear, that's the same as the one we saw before, right? There's no.
I know I'm not the only
verification.
case.
I think
You
I
don't
did
remember
share
as well as I do.
the red
But no,
highlighted.
you're right.
Yeah.
The,
it's like
the zone
this.
part changed,
Right.
yeah.
And so that was basically like
All this for a greenhouse?
everything
Yeah.
through here is,
But I'm saying,
you can't build anything. And so on this site,
it's a big greenhouse.
there's only two little spots that are outside of shoreland. And both of those spots are too close to the road, which is what it is.
Right.
And so that's why I printed this out, because it was just a zoom in to show, there are buildings, here's where the shoreland buffer is 250 feet. And everything in here is too close to the road, according to the core zoning code. So that's really what we're talking about is, would it be possible for the applicant to essentially rebuild the garage, wouldn't be a garage, but rebuild that building. While also, reducing the existing nonconformity. Not the size,
Okay.
it would be, I think it would be bigger, but the size of the building isn't the issue, that's too close to the road.
So you move it.
So they're gonna basically, move it back. And I imagine get rid of it and rebuild it, but move it back and. Basically, I would think. As close to that shoreland zone as possible without going into the
Yeah,
shoreland.
it looks like it would just fit behind the garage and stay out of the shoreline zone by 8 or 10 feet.
I mean, I guess the other possibility would be
But
to
that puts it in
expand
the
the
road
garage.
zone. Which
It
the
still
road
is,
zone
yeah.
changed.
Yeah.
Like I owned the property when the road zone changed.
Yep.
So a little behind it, all right.
There's no way of
Beat
getting
that.
around that road too.
No, not without going into shoreland. and
Way.
that's-
Both these are widely overlapping.
Yeah.
Setbacks.
Yeah, exactly.
It's completely penned in by tooth.
Yeah,
Well, he's got it right there. These maps are just about. The marsh and the stream and. But I don't think that there's any arguing about the shoreline zone.
I don't.
Like I'm just looking, familiarizing more, and it's listed as Sherman Marsh, Sherman Lake, and Sherman Stream. So it seems like there's an identity crisis going there. And wondering, what started it was wondering why is it in resource protection, which went on to talk to several people from the state, and they had different answers that it should have ended when the lake ended 20 years ago, but the other one said, no, it didn't, it's still in place.
Yeah,
So there's no wiggling around the 250 feet from the high water mark.
yeah, that's,
Talk to me a little bit more about the intended use that you want to put this to. Is this a commercial agriculture? Is this personal use? What is?
It's ultimately, bought the property 10 years ago in thoughts that when the kids grew up, we do some business there because there's 12 businesses along that stretch. And
Yeah.
so, and it's commercially, the first thing I asked, is it commercially zoned? And it is, but with all these stipulations, I didn't realize that.
Sure.
Like it says, I'm allowed one commercial building and one other building. So the greenhouse is a commercial 30 by 72.
So what you'd be growing, you'd be selling.
Well. Yes.
Okay.
So half of it would be a place to sit and. Enjoy the marsh,
Mhm.
like I get to enjoy it, because right now I sit on the deck and enjoy it, but I'm the only one. Unless I come.
But it's primarily a commercial enterprise is what you're thinking. It's-
Yes,
Okay.
and. Like. Have several different visions down the road, but it seems like if we can't put the greenhouse up, then. And what I'm learning about, because this is all educational for me, what I'm learning about the zone and the zoning, the core zones and the setbacks, and. So it limits some of what you can do there.
How big is the garage that you're planning on taking down?
The garage is 22 by 30. Like it's the same width that the greenhouse would be, the greenhouse would just be longer,
How long?
the greenhouse is 72, 30 by 72. But it's, it,
Two garage is
the garage is 22 by 30.
22 by 3.
But the garage, I'd like to get, it's so treacherous even now coming in and out of the driveway, especially from the south. Because it's got such a hook to it. So I'd like to, I wanted to remove the garage anyway, and it's pretty fairly dilapidated to it. I've slowly been trying to resurrect everything there, that's. It's my age, all of it.
Ben, I don't remember if we totally take down a non-conforming building. Can we rebuild on that same footprint?
I'm still researching that.
Well, and that's what I looked into at first, would I use the back wall of it and use it as an addition or rebuild and, use part of it, if that was the way it was, but it was put to me that because of the size difference, that like you couldn't call it an addition because it's bigger than I couldn't put it on the back of the house or attached to either building because it's too big to be called an addition. So I'm basically looking for what are the options and what can I. And it's 30 wide, but it's in 4-foot increments, so it can be manipulated in size a little bit.
How big is that you wanna make
It's
again?
72, it's just a kit that I bought. Like
Okay.
it's a Rimmel kit.
Yep,
And so it's just pipe frame and plastic on a pad,
yep,
but the end walls I wanted to match the house, so I wanted to,
right.
put siding.
So,
Make it. I don't want an ugly building.
okay. All right, I'm still doing a little bit of digging here.
Looks like it's under Article 4. Section 14A, the general for non-conforming buildings.
Page,
Oh, page is 51 and 52, but it does have a section where when a main building mass or non-conforming building is destroyed. And requires total replacement, the building must be rebuilt to meet the standard of the code.
wait a second. I'm not finding here.
Yeah, it shows here page 51 and 52.
Got it, I got you now.
15C,
Number 15.
15C.
Yeah, 15C, yeah.
Oh, I must be an old.
I have an old one.
Yeah,
Mine's
14,
14.
yeah,
Okay. 14 is mezzanines and.
I know.
Yeah.
One, two, and two.
yeah, mine's November 2020.
We've been here longer than everybody is.
Bunch of stipulations.
There's no path through nonconformity. That I can find, it's pretty clear.
Not very movable building.
Yep. I was looking at like additional structures to see if there was something, and then the reason I was asking about farming was because that's also the point, we called. And I don't know if it made it into this.
Cultural use had exceptions.
They had exceptions on agricultural uses.
In the rural district, general accessory, or agricultural use is. There's no limits on
Yeah.
size and
Right, No, I mean, there was something that was more town-wide.
Yeah. Not to do with connected farm.
Connected
No.
farm.
No.
No,
it was
that's
not.
where I'm
No, I
at.
think
That's
it's to
different.
do with like farm stands, things like,
Never
Right
did stuff,
farm.
brewery
and-
buildings.
Wilson Farm felt right.
it was like
Happened
farm
to
stands
that.
and
I have to get some chickens.
Yeah, man. You'll be fine.
still let a free range run through.
If in the rural.
Oh,
kind of
that's-
stuff.
Yeah, I can't even have pets.
So general C part two. Non-conforming may be altered. To reduce non-conformity.
Yeah, but then later it says that if the building is destroyed, it has to conform to the code.
And that's something to do with the height.
Sticking down. You can do a corner in every way here.
If I use the back wall.
I don't know,
Same width.
You were just sort of expand the garage to be,
Well, if I use the back wall of the garage and went half, I could take the whole front of the garage out. It's the same width,
right,
so it would be an easy to move.
So.
But if the use of the property is strictly residential, well, what are the commercial parts of it for?
Yeah, I mean, you have a very unique situation where
They did pass me on that,
what's that?
the appeals board, that it's very unique to this property.
Well, yeah, exactly. But
And then it's not my fault, the previous owner.
right.
Those two are good, but
Actually, you have to meet all of them.
yeah. And I'd hate to. I'd like to keep it in the property in the family for the 3 generations I'm in with now, but you can't own everything, so.
right,
Well, if it doesn't work, I have to make that choice.
oh. I'm going back to compliance, which is on like page 5 of the ordinance. I'm just trying to follow it all the way through here. Item 2B2, 4B2. Code allows waivers from standards of this code as explicitly authorized by the standards within this code if the permitting authority determines that A, allowance of the waiver is consistent with the purpose of this code, and B, the waiver does not exceed the allowed metric variations of qualitative criteria described in the section where the waiver is authorized. Allowance of a waiver under this code is considered an integral part of the application of the code and is not considered the granting of a variance. But it doesn't say.
You gonna use this building year round?
Yeah, probably not January, February.
What are you thinking?
It's too hard to eat.
Use
Yeah.
for a building? Is it gonna be on a slab?
No,
You know what I mean?
Yeah, but you're not gonna wanna take it up, put it down in terms of like a temporary building. Additional structures are limited to, I think, 300 square feet footprint in that district, and
Yeah, it's pretty limited.
and it still has to conform to accessory building setback standards for the district.
Just to be clear, even given the language of this waiver. If it were in the shoreline zone, we'd be bound by those rules, but it isn't. Is that
Correct.
Yes, right, we're outside of the shoreline zone where the garage is. So you, in principle, you could grant a waiver and not be in conflict with the shoreline zone. Just to be
Yeah.
clear.
Yeah, that's, I think, as long as you're outside of shoreline, then.
Yeah,
There's
yes,
no-
yes.
then shoreline
That
doesn't-
shoreline would override any local, just to be just to be.
So when you went,
Make sure I understand.
when you went for the variance,
Mhm.
what was it you were asking a variance for? Specifically,
The setbacks from the,
Road.
for under the core zoning code and under the shoreline. But basically, I think the conversation really was, it didn't get into shoreland or, wasn't really specific to code, to the core zoning code or the shoreland zone. It just went by the conversation was around the 4 statutory criteria.
By the state law.
Yeah.
Or statutory criteria.
So that
Was
was
there
just
discussion
to-
of specifics? I was there, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And so one of the things that board found was the reasonable return. Basically, you have, in order to grant a variance, you have to find that without the variance, the property owner wouldn't be able to generate a reasonable return. Very vague. And there was conversation with the attorneys, there was one of the neighbors is an attorney as well. But with the town's attorney about what other examples of reasonable return. What reasonable return is, and it maybe like, can you do anything with the property? And the fact that there's already stuff on the property was like, yeah, that's.
Can you do anything with the property without granting a variance? The answer unfortunately is yes. So that one didn't fall.
And apparently,
Well, you can live there.
yeah.
Yeah,
You can't-
it's unfortunately,
You can't do
yeah.
any commercial activity, even though.
Yeah.
Every other place along there is.
And it is zoned commercial.
Is business.
Yeah.
But the reason, to me, the reasonable return was kind of, seemed like opinion. Who's reasonable, you know, what have I invested, what have I, 10 years of,
Constitutes return.
and what, yeah.
Well, and so I'm not to rehash that because
But, yeah.
that's not.
well, it's not our job, but I don't agree with their findings, so I would take it to Superior Court.
I was gonna say, that's a decision of the appeals board.
It is
right?
a decision of the appeals
That's
board.
their determination.
Yeah.
They have legal right.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll be honest, it's not, we're not making a ruling on it. I personally do not agree with what they found.
Well.
It's a
Me,
greenhouse.
me
guys.
either.
Love that.
I mean, you don't have a commercial operation there now. You are allowed to have a commercial operation there. So the question of whether you can have a reasonable return is directly related to whether or not you can even put something there
Right,
that creates a reasonable return.
right.
And if you're not even allowed to place something there that creates a reasonable return or not,
And when
then you are absolutely qualifying for a variance.
Like I lived on Dire Neck when I invested in the property way 10 years ago and thinking, you know, as a. It's commercial property, you'll do something with it later and it's an investment, and so what I've, you know, worked on the place, paid the taxes on the place, you know, it's. The reasonable return or the, just to do the business, when I bought it, it was a 50-foot setback and it was. You know, I was told it was 75 from the water because the lake was gone, but that was incorrect, so.
Yep.
Under those pretenses is what moved, you know, as I went forward, and now I'm at this spot where. If I can't, you know, do anything other than just live there, it's not that desirable for me as a. As an investment, but now I don't live on Dire Neck, I live there, so like
Right,
I've lived in Newcastle for almost 30 years.
right. Yep. Go ahead.
So, this is sort of a tangent, but. Sherman Lake isn't there anymore. Right?
Correct.
So,
It used to only be 75 feet because it was a lake, but now because it's part of the Marsh River, because the Marsh River has always been 250 as a resource protection. They
It was
extended.
250 from the lake, actually.
Oh, it
Because
was
when I,
250 from
they
the
gave me
lake.
the number to call the DEP and I got the history and that was the first thing she said, it's not a lake anymore, right? And I go, no, she said, then it should be 75 feet, it's tight.
Mhm.
But like I said, every time I've called, I get different answers from the different people that you talk to.
So because I looked into this, because anytime something comes up with shoreline, I always say. Find out where the highest astronomical tide line is and make sure we're actually measuring from
Right.
where you want to measure from, because the maps are iffy. So I did go and get a
She did
pull the
update.
data for
updated
the
that, yeah.
highest astronomical tide now. It's not that different because the it's a wetland. And the reason that it's in resource protection is because it's like, there's like wading bird habitat, or I don't remember exactly what it is, but so like, that is something that puts things into resource protection if you're adjacent to wetlands that are wading bird habitat, which is why basically all that whole area around there, a lot of it is in resource protection. Now, if whether or not it is bird wading habitat, you know, I don't know how you go about kind of poking a hole in that or checking that really. Because I know some of that data is, you know, it was established, I don't know, it could have been established 40 years ago.
Cause in 10 years, like I've never seen water up as high as, and there's no blue line out there, you know, when I walk out to measure from it, there's no blue line out there, so I'm having to, it's kind of guessing where.
Yeah.
Where the high water mark is, and that was something the DEP said too, just because there's cat nine tails doesn't mean it's the high water mark.
Right.
That, you know, one whole section of it has never seen water.
Well, and that's so the map that I made was off of the highest astronomical tide, which the date of that, it was October 9th, 2025 is when that line was established. I don't know if that was the high tide line or that was just the most recent. So it is definitely since the dam was removed and the lake is gone. But like a actual delineation hasn't been done. So, you know, it's like, so if now hiring a marine biologist to go do a.
She said that, you know, it'd have to be at my expense and I could
Yeah.
get a biologist to come in and, but that was like, I was hoping to put up a greenhouse and then pursue that later, cause that significantly takes a big chunk of the property and says you can't do anything, like, except I can have a garden, I think.
Well, and I imagine that even if you were to do a wetland delineation, I can't imagine it's not like it's gonna remove, the line might move,
Well,
even if it
and-
moved 10 feet, it's not gonna move it.
Yeah, and you can see like right now, the majority of that shoreline zone is my lawn and I mow it.
Yeah.
So there's no birds nesting in it. You know, the deer come up and eat my garden, but
Yeah.
that's about it.
Yeah. And so,
It's tough, and I'm not trying to tie up everybody's time
Yeah.
arguing about the wetland, because that's a whole nother fight. That's a whole nother can of worms. I was
Yeah.
just trying to see if there was any options or anywhere on the property, like I could get out of the shoreline zone, but I can't get out of the road zone, I can only do one or the other, and it's so narrow and overlaps on half of it, and
The only place that didn't overlap was your original spot, right?
no, it overlapped there.
I thought it didn't.
No, that, when I first was trying to put it up by the fence, so it was it was the furthest from the road and the high water, and it was the least in anybody's view. But it was, I don't know, like 50 feet of it would have been in the shoreline zone, so I didn't like.
So is this the same plan you took, is this the exact same plan you took to the appeals board, or have you changed it?
Same, yeah, same.
So you haven't moved the.
Well, this is why I'm at a pre-application is like, could I make it work over behind the garage, like I could make that work for me, but. And I could get out of the shoreline, but I couldn't get out of the road setback, but I could be less.
No, I was just wondering if this was the exact plan that you took to the appeals board.
No, the only plan to the appeals board was about the setbacks, and all it did was I asked for them to be back to where they were when I started, because I was just had to pick a number, you know, and I thought maybe we would. Hash out a little bit, is 75 feet, that's a little bit much, you know, can you do it with 100 or 150? And I could literally get it 150 from the high water and 150 from the road. That first spot.
And that gets you your building?
Yeah, that was like the best spot, and it was the least
Yeah.
intrusive to either zone, but they failed it at the appeal, you know, that. It still would be in the zones, but just by probably 30, 50, maybe.
Yeah, Mike.
May I inject something that may be urgent?
Mhm.
You said you don't agree with the Board of Appeals decision. If he wants to appeal to Superior Court, according to my MMA docs, that appeal must be filed within 45 days of the BOA vote. It's
We're within that.
sorry?
We're within that now, still.
Yeah, right, but
Right.
that meeting was, time flies, right? And,
Yeah.
Sure.
you want to keep that in mind.
And it's like,
how
I'm
long,
not-
how
you
long
know-
ago was that meeting?
I was trying to just figure this out without getting attorneys and,
Yeah.
site plans and which the appeals board, when I left, that's what they suggested. Well, maybe you should get an attorney and maybe you should get a site plan and then come back and work with us. And I'm like, I'm trying not to,
Mhm.
you know, and not to start out this whole project being everybody's thorn. You know, the neighbors already came in and said I would ruin her view. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, I can't put anything between your house and the view.
All right, so just,
But that's, you know,
the only thing that hasn't actually been
neighbors.
determined is. The actual 250-foot buffer. Is that correct?
Like where the
That hasn't
location is.
actually been delineated by a,
By like, well, no, you're talking about like doing a wetland delineation,
Yeah.
seeing where that puts it.
yeah,
Correct. Correct.
so this is a total guess and it could move
It could.
a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, because I don't know how they determined this high astronomical tide, because that's basically what you want as a scientist to go out there and say, what's the highest astronomical tide? Because that's where the
Well, and just to make
measured.
you know, if it
Should also
helps,
be on
that
here, though.
I've done the measurement so far, and I went to the edge of my lawn, which is probably another 20 feet from that blue line. Like I didn't walk out into the marsh to measure, I measured from the edge of the Army Corps built a berm around the whole lake. So there's this knee-high berm at the edge of where I mow. And so I just measured from that, giving myself even more buffer, and it still was 150 feet from that, and I didn't even
To
measure
what?
from the center line because that-
350 feet to what?
to the back of the proposed
Building?
where I want the greenhouse, yeah.
Oh, but what I'm saying is like, if you have someone go out there and actually do a wetland delineation, they'll go find the exact measurement.
Yeah.
From the water. And show you exactly where that,
Yeah, But the-
I guess the
the
dotted blue
50
line.
is so much further up that I don't know that would make, you know,
It's so far.
it's so far,
Yeah.
like the 250 comes right up to that bush there that's,
Yeah.
you know, just off the back of my deck. And it's on a crazy line following the shore, so it's.
So how much relief could you get if you changed the shoreline line to the highest astronomical tide? Could you get 100 feet,
Potentially a
200
lot,
feet?
that, I mean, that has changed dramatically,
No way. bro.
It had, but
and nobody surveyed it.
living there though, for 10 years, in the 10 years, like. On these super moons and, you know, waiting to melt off, like water does come up. Probably 20 feet,
To the
30
berm.
feet from the berm, yeah.
Oh, okay, so you know that, all
Oh, I
right.
know that, yeah.
And that's, I'm
I
not
probably
even
got pictures of that.
sure, like highest astronomical tide and wetland,
Are different.
you know.
They're
could
different
be,
things.
Yeah.
They're way different.
You know, like that, I'm just wondering, like, you can get someone to go out there and be like, yeah, here's where the wetland ends.
I think that's what the deed.
and it's like, well, evolution, if like elevation, if like the stars align almost literally, then how high could the water, what's the highest astronomical tide? Maybe like basically this. And it's like, doesn't matter that that there's no water, native water plants or whatever they use to determine.
Yep.
No, not to say like, I mean, explore whatever option, and that's why I figured bring it here before you start going and spending money on
Mhm.
attorneys and.
And this garage is 22 feet long.
From the road, yes, 30 wide.
Yeah. How far is it away from the road?
Well, from the set, I don't measure the center line, 'cause that's treacherous, but from the edge of the road, from the breakdown lane, it's like 28 feet. Which is, you know, my truck's 20, so I'm
That's
3-point turning just to get into my driveway.
The rural highway thing is what's really preventing anything happening on this property. If a rural or a commercial highway, then only 50 feet for.
And that's what it was when I bought it, that's
Yeah.
why, I guess it was 2019, 2020, it changed,
Change the rule.
yeah. And I thought maybe because I owned it when it changed, that I might get a little, the stars might align for me.
Well, I mean, it's both, honestly, I mean, it's. The shoreline. If the shoreline bubble is correct, I mean, that eats virtually all your property,
Yeah.
Yeah, it overlaps with the new
Road
road.
offset doesn't
it
really
eats
matter.
everything. You know, and to me, it looks like you've got, you know, 40 feet off the back of your house before you hit the shoreline, 250-foot setback.
Right. In immediately, then it jets up. You
And
know,
then,
because
yeah, it goes up
follows
behind the
shore.
garage, it's even, yeah,
Yeah,
closer. Um. So, I mean, shoreland is, you know. Shoreland is shoreland, it's sacred, we can't.
it seems
can't
that
do anything
way.
with
That's
that.
why I said if behind the garage, I could shift a little and I could get it out of shoreline, but it would be dealing with the road setback.
Right.
Which. By the 50-foot setback, I could get behind that. I
Yeah.
can't get behind 200 feet, then
Right.
back in the water almost.
All right, well, I'll tell you, I mean, I think we've hit almost every, we've investigated and we've hit every possibility for legally attempting to do it and not finding any way to do it, so there's really only two options left for you. One is you can file for a zoning change. So your lot,
Because I noticed that the rest areas zoning is like residential or something.
yeah, right.
It's.
Somehow they can do
You wouldn't
anything.
wanna
up
live
there. Yeah,
So you could file for a zoning amendment. That process is longer. It has to go to town meeting. It has to be voted on by the town. Yeah. I know.
With that, how would that address shoreland and the road setback?
It wouldn't address shoreland at all.
But it would make it so instead of a 200-foot setback for an accessory building, it could be 50 feet.
Hmm.
Which means you would be able to, where the current garage sits, you would in theory be able to put the greenhouse there. Because you would be able to have that setback in the road, and as long as it keeps it out of that shoreline zoning, the resource protection,
He's good to go.
you'd be good to go.
The fact that you're in
If
within the
they're all-
roads. Yeah.
that's why I said if I used the back wall of the garage and went back from it, yeah, would that work?
Not under the current regulations of the core
Right.
zoning code.
So if I gotta file to change codes or go to Supreme Court, then I gotta get attorneys and go all, so I'm gonna have to rethink this one as far as.
You know, the zoning amendment's probably the easiest path because you're really saying essentially, I'd like the town to consider taking my parcel out of this district and putting it in this district. That's really what it is.
Yeah, see, I'm
And so
pretty
you
new to all of this.
can talk to Michael. You can-
Yeah,
That's,
it'd be-
that's a pretty straightforward request.
Might be the path
Yeah.
of least resistance.
It would be the path of
What
least
kind of
resistance.
time was that? Like, I mean, last September I applied. Yeah, it's
Right.
bad.
It's not a quick process.
It's not a quick process.
But you don't need attorneys and.
No.
You don't need
Yes.
attorneys. It would just have to be voted on by the town, and there's a process for it. I think it goes to the next. Available, annual or special town meeting to be voted on. The next annual town meeting is it's too close to get on that warrant.
How often do they?
Annual town meeting is every year in
Annuals,
June.
once a year.
Yeah, once a year. But we have. I guess we had 4 special town meetings last year.
Yeah.
So we have special town meetings pretty regularly, every, 3 to 4 months.
Yeah, it's like quarterly unless it's not necessary,
Correct. Yeah.
so.
And I know that we have one, or we're thinking about doing one for, September.
Into like in the fall,
Yeah,
just like hopefully get some of these zoning changes that we've been talking about
exactly.
through, so.
So
This
that-
one would be
yeah,
fairly easy to
yeah.
put together.
I mean, that's one path. The only other path would be to propose a contract zone. You would need to have a lawyer for that. It's a little bit more complicated.
And I don't think it's
It's not covered in the
in
code,
the code, which.
right? It's
You
a,
have to go to town meeting for that anyway,
you'd have to go to town meeting for that anyway.
so.
And then the third option would be to challenge the Board of Appeals. Ruling in Superior Court, for which you should have a lawyer if you want to do that. Don't. try to
Fourth
do that.
option is to test their reasonable return and see the realtor.
You could ask for a little bit of time from our,
Just, no,
A
if it's
municipal
gonna
lawyer.
be so much. Whether I wanna move on.
Right.
I'd like to keep that property, but
yeah, I know,
it's
yeah.
Yeah, well,
So it sounds like at least for this, that
couple options.
putting an application together for this to the planning board. Probably fruitless.
I mean, I can't, all I can say, and I can't speak for the board, and I'm not making a judgment here, is that I just don't see a legal path forward. Does anyone?
Wonder, yeah. That's
Um,
so. Effort better spent elsewhere, probably.
I think so.
That's what I wanted to understand, and we can talk about what the options, what other options and
Mhm.
time and cost and things,
Yeah.
not that I had. It's all would be an estimate, but we should talk and we can,
Yeah,
that way you
there's
can make your decision.
nothing's still, you still can keep going to denial to denial.
Yeah, and we don't want to waste your time forever, but
No.
we want to make you aware of what your options are.
Sure, that's the whole point of having this meeting, was just seeing what their options are, and then I'll make the best choice, I guess.
Yeah.
I'll appreciate it.
Thank you very much for your time. Alrighty.
And if we got a phone call there, I thought it was at 6, so I got here and I.
Oh, it's at yours, okay.
Yeah,
I wouldn't
I
hear
called
it.
you earlier.
Sorry about
I got
that.
here at 6, and like.
Nobody's here.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to new business item B, now 16-1. 50 McNeil Point for an application review. So I'll take a second to pull that up. All right. Good evening, gentlemen. How are we doing?
Great, thanks for taking my time.
So, yeah, why don't you give us an overview of the project here and what your application entails?
Yeah, so this is 50 McNeil, and there's an existing a cottage sitting next to Damerscott Lake at that property. It's basically in a 1,245 square foot cottage, which we'd like to rebuild. And basically newly rebuild and renovated cottage in kind with what's there existing, so basically replicate the 1,245 square feet, same style cottage, basically same footprint. But be able to improve or replace the foundation of the cottage, and then be able to go beyond the 50% threshold of the renovation of the cottage. Right, so that ideally is what we like to do, that kind of basically just rebuild, renovate in kind and improve it. And so the cottage is bracketed by 2 setbacks. One obviously being the lake, and then the second one an adjacent stream. So what our thinking is that it reviewing with the board that approach, and I believe like a GPE review, right? So that's our thinking about it, cottage tonight.
GPE review.
Oh, sorry, like the greatest practical extent.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, great.
That's basically the high level summary.
Okay, yeah, all right. Perfect. And we got a letter from the DEP somewhere in correspondence where the stream on the map you gave us is in fact a stream.
Yeah, correct, just for all of
Clarification.
all of our purposes, all of our documentation,
Yes.
was that, yeah, DEP and Dusty helped kind of coordinate that review.
Now, I will say, it's a stream according to DEP and their regulations. It is not a stream. Does not meet the definition of a stream of the town shoreline zone.
Okay.
So,
That's still true. That was true at last. meeting.
yeah, well, because you've seen this this project before.
Yeah,
Yeah, we had a
The pre-app, and so this project did go, the code enforcement officer has issued a permit to use some of the project, basically renovate the house, up to 50% of the value of the house. Basically kind of rebuild and I think expand in place. And so that's, I think, is the kind of the difference is going beyond the 50% and what triggers that pulls, which is the greatest practical extent. Once you go beyond 50% of the value of the building, then greatest practical, then the applicant's obligated to move the building to make it conform with the setbacks to the greatest practical extent, and as determined by the planning board. Don't quote me on that, but so that I think is the question is if it goes beyond 50%, where like what's moving it to be conforming to the greatest practical extent.
But as I understand it, looking at this, we have a 25-foot setback from Newcastle Lake, and part of the house is in that. I mean, it cuts through part of the house. Is that correct?
Yeah, that front part of the existing structure, yeah. Something else.
Right, so my read on shoreline, and correct me if I'm wrong. If you have a pre-existing non-conforming structure closer than 25 feet to a lake, for example, and you remove it, you cannot rebuild it within that 25 feet period. I don't think there's any exception that the shoreline zoning offers other than the 50% and regular maintenance. But if the building itself is demolished or removed, or if it catches on fire and burns to the ground, and you want to rebuild it, you have to rebuild it outside the 25 feet. There is no way you can build within the 25 feet, period. That's my understanding.
So the 50% is 50% renovation, what is it?
50% of the cost to,
I think it's
Of
like
the
the
value.
assessed value.
So the limitations on how much you invest in it?
no, it's, yeah, well, yes, exactly. So you take your assessed value and you can, renovate, up to half of that. And that would not be considered, you still have to the greatest extent possible,
Yeah, it's
become less non-conforming.
it's not how much money you can put into it. It's you have a house, if half of it were to be chopped off. How you determine what a half of a house is worth, it only is worth. If your house is missing one wall, it's gonna be less valuable, right? But either way, in theory, if you cut it in half, you still got half of the house. Of the pre-project assessed value, you can rebuild it. If you've got 49% of a house.
Right.
Now you have to, that's the line that you cross, you have to now move it to be conforming to the greatest practical.
Right.
So it's about that at least the way that I am looking at it is like you chop half the house off, that's the line.
And that's for anything located within 75 feet. Is 50%.
It doesn't meet the setback, but yeah, so the 25%, it says expansion of any portion of a structure within 25 feet horizontal distance of a normal high water line. Of a water body, tributary stream, upland edge of a wetland is prohibited, even if the expansion will not increase the nonconformity with the water body, tributary, whatever. So it's basically like if you're within 25 feet, you maintain it.
And the way the design in the existing house is that portion that's within the 25 feet is a single story, like a low slope roof. That portion of the project remains the same in terms of its footprint, its height, and so I guess what I'm saying is that portion that is within the 25, you're not expanding.
It doesn't matter whether you're expanding it or not. If you're tearing it down, you've torn it down. You then have to become conforming.
Yeah, or the other approaches that we would like to be able to take is, renovate, improve, beyond that 50% threshold, not necessarily tear down the entire structure as an option, right? But, That's another way that we're trying to think about it. Make the best improvements, but in order to do that. So that we may want to. Exceed that 50%, whatever that percentage is beyond that, it's hard to judge. But.
Yeah, that which so that the 25% stuff is for expansions. If you're looking at the shoreline zoning code on page 16, it's, let me see. Under R nonconformance, you go to section R3C, which is reconstruction or replacement.
Page 16.
Page 16, yeah. And I'll read it. Any non-conforming structure which is located less than the required setback from a water body, which is removed, damaged, or destroyed, regardless of the cause by more than 50% of the market value of the structure before such damage, may be reconstructed or replaced, provided a permit is obtained within 18 months of the date of the damage, and provided such reconstruction is in compliance with the setback requirement to the greatest practical extent as determined by the plan. Yeah, no, this is all shoreline. So that is, now if you don't go this is where if you were to remove 40% of it, you don't have to, then that greatest practical extent not relevant, doesn't come into play. You go beyond 50%, now it comes into play. Now you have to move it to the greatest practical extent.
But if you remove all of it that's in the non-conforming zone, you can't rebuild it back in the non-conforming zone.
Right. If
So if that, even if it's below that 40%, if you take that piece that's non-conforming and you destroy it, you can't build that back.
I think you can.
Okay.
I think if your house burns down, if you go into 0%, you take 100% of it away, you have to rebuild it to the greatest practical extent. If 25% of the building gets destroyed, you can rebuild it where it is. Don't have to worry about greatest practical extent. Less than 50%, you can just rebuild it. Once you cross that 50%, now am I allowed to build it here? And that's what this is saying, at least my reading of it is, if you remove more than 50% of the building value, whatever, now the question is, where can I rebuild it? And it has to be to the greatest practical extent, meeting whatever the setback is.
Got it. I don't see an argument for exceeding the 50% value and keeping it encroaching on the 25-foot lakefront setback as being greatest practical extent. I don't see a logical argument for that when the new house, if the old house is bulldozed and the new house is built, we're not even thinking about the stream, but just from the lake frontage, the new house could be built outside of the 25 feet, and at the bare minimum, that could be considered greatest practical extent. That could be an argument for greatest practical extent. But to rebuild it within the 25, that's not an argument for greatest practical extent, in my opinion.
And this is the stream setback, what I'm seeing here, this arching little red line.
The
75.
There's two lines of concern. There's the 25 feet from the lake.
Yeah.
And the 75
And the
feet from the stream.
it does have a
They both
arrow,
cross inside the house.
Yeah.
75, but
Like they both cross inside the house?
Yeah, right inside. The living room is.
They are.
yeah, I mean,
I was gonna say there's a theme tonight.
If you
Yeah.
split.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why we're here.
non-conformity. I love non-conformity.
Yeah.
Again, I just want to reiterate that 75-foot stream setback it is street. DEP says it's a stream. DEP thinks it's a stream. DEP regulates it as a stream. DEP has a whole separate set of standards. DEP does what DEP does.
Mm-hmm.
I can read the definition of the stream for the shoreline zoning. It's like it has to be on the USGS map, and it has to be downstream, the confluence of two streams that are shown on there. So
Streams meet in the night and.
so what I'm saying is, like, if this was a stream, the planning board would be like, no, you can't build anything within 75 feet of it. But it's not a stream, And so. The planning board would be like, yeah, sure, you can build something close to that. DEP might say like, no, you can't.
Right, so, but
Yeah.
caveat emptor, the DEP may come along and say, well, the planning board said you could, we say you can't.
And that absolutely can happen.
And when it comes to shoreline, their authority exceeds ours, so
Right,
it's,
yeah. so
you gotta
you're
get
taking a
permits
risk.
from them.
Yeah,
so-
the owner probably would have to obviously respect that 75 and comply with, you know.
Well, what they didn't say, if you read their letter, it doesn't say that you can't build within 75. They just said, yes, that's a stream for DEP's purposes. If you want to build within 75, they're gonna have to look at
They're
it.
gonna have to look at it.
They're gonna have to look at
You're
it.
gonna have to get
So,
And
and,
a
that-
permit from them,
and that's where I
and
say
that's
like,
another process, right?
you know. If DEP says, no, you're not allowed to put it in 75 feet, then I think the planning board can say, like, great, well, we're not. If we tell you to move it back there and they say you can't, then you're in a pickle.
Yeah.
But right now, at least it's like, it may be a pain in the administratively.
Yeah.
To go through, but DEP lets things happen within 75 feet of things all the time. Because they have that flexibility of. So. Now, and that's why I said, like, if DEP says no, I think it would be reasonable to say, great, we'll consider that a hard wall, but they haven't said no. Yeah, they've said, we're gonna need to look at it.
Go at it like. Assuming they.
Yeah.
Would say yes and.
Never assume.
Well, we don't base our approvals or denials on what the
Yeah,
DEP says or
we gotta
doesn't
get
say.
off what we have.
We go off of what we know.
And if we don't consider that stream, then.
We don't consider it
We are
stream.
gonna look at it. We're focused more on the 25 feet from the lake.
And the interesting part is normally, and we talked about this, normally, like, when we're looking at this stuff, people wanna, like, oh, there's a stream there, but I wanna put my house wherever. And normally it's like, well, is it a stream for shoreland? And when it's not a stream for shoreland, the planning would be like, sure, you can be 50 feet away from that, because it's not a stream. This is a situation where it's reverse. Normally people like we try to follow the letter to be helpful. This time it is not. It is not helping the applicant to have it not be a stream.
All right,
It's a little bit backwards. which-
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I get you. Good. I'm personally, I'm still focused on the 25-foot setback out of lake, and
There's no way around it.
I don't think there's any practical way around that, because I don't believe that the application demonstrates that relocating that small portion of the footprint from the side to the back is the greatest practical extent. And at the bare minimum, I'll just reiterate, at the bare minimum, greatest practical extent would be moving the footprint of the house. Since we're doing a complete tear down and rebuild, moving the footprint of the house out of the 25-foot completely would be demonstration of greatest practical extent. At minimum.
right, and I would say, so there are other cases on the property that you couldn't put a house. Which would not be, which would meet shoreline zoning. You might be outside the shoreline zone, but you would meet the shoreline zoning setback. You'd be possibly the furthest building from the water, but
Oh, no, yeah. I got
stay,
it.
you would
yeah,
stay
yeah.
on the property, build a house that is conforming, it would not be close to the water
Be on the septic field, basically,
or next to it, yeah.
way up there.
But there's a path forward for building. How's that work? What's the path or process for building within 75 feet? Like, if you wanted to build brand new. You can't build brand new within.
It's not if
75
there's
feet.
somewhere else on your property. I mean, you could, it would be, we looked at an application where there wasn't anywhere to build. Outside, it was resource protection, but that they couldn't, if there's nowhere for you to build. You can get, like, it's not a variance, but the planning board can say, yeah, okay, we can let you build a house. Too close to the water because there's nowhere else to build.
And then that falls in like camp 159 square
Yeah.
feet, camp, there was, oh, yeah, I remember that one.
Well, and it's like, it has to be the only building on, or the only house on the property.
So the only way to get this done is through section B relocation. That's the whole crux, right? We're relocating the structure.
If you want to go beyond 50%.
innocent question, can he leave the portion and like build up against it?
You mean the portion within 25 feet? I mean, that ultimately that's up to you, but when it said the 25 feet issue, the setback is basically for expansions. So as long as you don't expand what's within 25 feet. You know,
You know what I mean? Like just whatever's there, just like.
Effectively, what we're doing is keeping that as is. It's just a little, just for what it's worth from my perspective, like we have a building permit today to effectively build what we want to build. The only issue is we can't improve the foundation based on the rules that exist in there. And that's what I
Can't
struggle
improve the
with.
foundation, couldn't like jack it up and redo it?
That still falls under the 50%.
yeah, and actually you don't, even if you don't,
It's pretty.
even if you don't.
The foundation is almost like a separate
Doesn't make any sense.
line item.
Yeah,
That triggers, I think, GP.
yeah, so even if you had the house, you want, you're not touching any, you're not going anywhere near 50%. If you want to replace the foundation, you have to do the greatest practical extent.
But that portion that is within the 25, when we're talking about the 50% threshold, I mean, that portion that's in the 25, you can propose to leave alone, just maintenance and repair type thing.
Within 25 feet.
Yeah, that portion that's within, just, that portion that's within it, and leave as much of the structure as possible and improve it.
Probably like.
But
11%,
have-
sure.
But have the ability to improve the foundation that's there and go beyond that threshold. Right, so not necessarily eliminate the cottage in its entirety,
Right.
right?
Is there a time frame on what point you can do the 50%?
So.
So could he just do 50% 1 year and come back and do 50%?
No.
Well, is there a time?
Well, I'm not math.
Good
though.
question, no,
We
it's
love
cumulative.
math.
That's the thing.
Forever,
Dude.
all time.
In all seriousness, that wouldn't be- you can't do that, right? But it wouldn't be an efficient project.
Correct.
For the owner.
No, you can't do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Regardless.
The other related question that it's been unclear for a couple of years is. For maintenance and repair, I've been at this for a few years trying to figure out the best way to advance this forward. We've owned this for almost 50 years and it's gotten pretty rough. And so is the baseline, you said the assessed value, so if I spent, X amount of dollars just literally gutting, renovating the place as is, exactly as it is for maintenance, for repair purposes, new windows, roof, all the things that it needs, candidly, does that set the new baseline?
No, maintenance, regular maintenance, you need to strip your shingles off.
Yeah.
Put on new shingles. That does not hit the 50%.
Right, okay, so.
You need to replace windows, you need to replace doors, you need to rebuild the deck exactly the way that it was without expanding it.
Right,
Because it's rotted out.
right,
That's maintenance.
Right.
Wood rots. Roofs leak,
for sure.
okay? So that does not qualify as reconstruction.
So from establishing the baseline value that the 50% is judged off of, if I were to invest the money to take it back to, sort of an improved state via the maintenance and repair, that's allowable. Because that's what I'm worried about. Like you guys know how much things cost, right? To do anything. And if you assess the cottage now, you'd be like, okay, you need a roof, your windows are falling apart, foundation has some structural issues. So I'm just nervous that you get an assessment and it would be very limiting as to what I could do in terms of just, improvements under the permit as it sits.
All right, so there's two different things. There's market value.
Yeah.
Which is appraised value,
Okay.
and then there's assessed value, which is for the purposes of assessing taxes. The town does tax assessment value, which is supposed to closely follow appraised value, which is the market. And it's supposed to be, but it is generally less. Assessed value is generally less. Ideally, it's close.
Which one do we go off of?
We're only concerned, for the purposes of this, we're only concerned with assessed value.
Well, actually, it says market value.
What? No, what? Where?
50% of the market value of the structure.
The market's changing.
Okay, it does say market value, I'm sorry. I was wrong. So you have to get an appraisal, not an assessment. which is different, which gives you more money to
For
work
sure.
with.
And so I think that the point that you're raising is interesting because if you go and do all kinds of, I mean, you were to improve the inside of the house, gold plated everything, and then you go and look at what's 50% of the value versus like if you just don't touch the house and just let it deteriorate over time, the longer that goes, the smaller, so now you gold plate everything and then, the first floor this year and gold plate the first floor next year. Like at some point, like what that whole 50% value thing starts to become like a weird game of like, well, what happens if I increase the value by 10% this year, 10% next year, and 10% next year? All of a sudden, you're gonna have $1 million house that like now you can make $50,000 worth of demo. You can demo $50,000 worth of the house where 10 years ago you could only demo $200,000, right? It's like
It's been done.
it is this ordinance, and it's not the towns, and I didn't write it, we didn't write it from the state. It's not perfect.
Appreciate you guys taking the time to consider.
It's difficult to figure out.
What's the rationale for the 50%? What are they trying to prevent?
Ask the person who wrote it.
That's
That's the best guess.
Do you know how it's enforced? Is it based on permit value, like
What is enforced?
the 50% test, if you will? Like, so obviously we can establish a market value based on an appraisal. If I have a contract from Derek from Chapman, and are they just comparing those two things? I'm just saying, is it that simple?
The code enforcement office would probably want to see the final bills. Because there's a difference between like getting a proposal for work and the actual cost to do the work. So, yeah, you could make the argument that you could get an appraisal from, third-party appraisal company. They come up with a number, you say, okay, contractor, I can't exceed this amount. They give you a contract for whatever that amount is or whatever less. You show that to the code enforcement officer, and the code enforcement officer says, okay, I can approve that. Under this 50% of market value, as long as you meet all the other criteria, and then you go and do the work. The code enforcement officer is going to want to follow up to make sure that you didn't then just double it and double it and double it again.
Sure, of course. Yeah.
That's-
And that's the situation that we're trying to be conscious of and do up front and be on board.
Absolutely.
That's a very fundamental question.
No. Yes, it is.
But just in mincing words here implies that remove damage to destroyed is not the intent of the owner or the actions of the owner.
But it
You know what
says
I'm saying?
regardless
It's
of
almost-
cause.
Regardless of cause, okay. It's a little bit of a gray area in my mind.
Well,
I mean, we accidentally knocked down, removed the building.
Yeah, but no, they used the correct English comma
Yeah,
here.
regardless of.
So it's
I mean,
regardless
you
of-
can intentionally,
It actually means that regardless of cause. So for whatever
removed
okay.
could be
act of God or otherwise.
Intentionally removed by the owner, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that's clear,
That's consistent.
clearly understood.
Yeah, that's consistent with what I
Definitely.
see in other towns going in front of boards such as yourselves.
With
Yeah.
the
Okay, all right.
shoreland is.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's
Just
always
need to
gonna be
understand. I
clear.
want to make sure, that there's no loophole here that we're not fighting.
Well, bless you. All right, so I mean. We can keep knocking this around. But I would suggest at the moment that the application, you would have one approved application. Right?
we've got a permit.
You got a permit.
We got a
You got a
permit
permit.
through CEO.
All right, so this application, and again, I'm not making any judgments, we haven't voted or anything like that, but I would suggest that there's probably no path for approval for this application as it stands. We can keep beating it around, we can keep looking at it, but I think we've all identified enough issues where. Just not feasible as presented, so. We could move right into like, voting on that and see how that shakes out, or. You could table the application and you could amend it, and you could come back with an amended application. At our next planning board meeting. Don't know what that would look like, but I just want to give you. The options right now.
So that I'm clear, is there a potential pathway if we were able to move it beyond the 25? But that would probably mean like a complete, like a rebuild. We'd still be building within 75, but at least it would maybe be out of the 25. But that gets into like. Yeah, but more total removal.
So the if you remove more than 50%, then it gets into the greatest practical extent question, which the minimum setback to be conforming is 75 feet. So the 25 feet is just like a very bad. Being behind 75 feet, good. The other thing is, if you're gonna move it, even if you don't remove 50%, then you have the foundation. And it's like because whenever a new and large replacement foundation is constructed under a non-conforming structure, the structure of the new foundation must be placed back to the greatest practical. It's the same thing. Basically, if you remove more than 50% or you redo the foundation, you have to do this greatest practical extent, and that's basically I would say the board has to make a decision whether if you're proposed. I think right now your proposal is remove more than 50%, potentially rebuild the foundation. And if that's what you're proposing, then the board would have to say, is where they're proposing to build it meeting, is it as getting as close to the conforming as possible, the greatest practical extent? And if not, then I don't think the application can be approved. If there could be some conversation, because it's a little bit weird, there could be some conversation of what is the greatest practical extent, and that guidance would be helpful for the applicant, because the applicant can say, okay, what's the greatest practical extent? What does that look like? And basically modify their application so that you can say, yes, that's the greatest practical extent approved.
But I guess
I don't know.
the other thing working against us, Michael, right, is the inability of the shoreland zone, I'm sorry, ordinance to recognize the stream setback, at least black and white. Is that, because that plays into the greatest practical extent kind of conversation, right? So maybe that's.
I think yes, because with all of this, the burden is on you all to prove that you're meeting the ordinance. And so, right now, at least to me, and this is obviously up to you all to decide, is if have you demonstrated that moving it into that 75-foot buffer, the stream buffer, is not possible, right? Like if so, that's where I say, like, I would think you would need a firm decision by DEP to say, maybe they say we can let you go within 75 feet, but you're absolutely not allowed to go within 50 feet. And then I think it would be reasonable for the planning board to say, like, okay, well, we can't tell you that moving it within 50 feet is to the greatest practical extent, right? I think it would be reasonable to consider that. But that's right now, I don't think that you have the evidence to say like, well, we proved that we can't go in there. So I think it would be the planning board have to say, no, you haven't proved that you met the standard, kind of thing. At least today. At my opinion. Obviously, it's not up to me.
Well, there's really two things, right? Greatest practical extent, we can argue And we actually have some discretion around greatest practical extent.
Hmm.
The 50% threshold, that's like a hard number with no waiver, no variance, no interpretation, as far as I can tell. That is like a shoreland line in the sand. It's not movable. And so I think that is a hard barrier, as far as I understand it. But I mean, I'm reading it. I keep reading it a million times, and I just don't see a way around that. Practical extent, yeah. And other folks, you know, obviously we've approved things where like they've had something that's within shoreland. And like it's a deck and they wanna you know, do something with the deck or whatever, we can talk about whatever. However that might work and like redesign the deck or whatever. That's not gonna come close to the 50%. But I just don't. Give me a few.
One thing I don't understand, so if you have an unimproved lot on the lake. You build a structure. Cabin. The setback is what, 75 feet?
Mhm.
Yeah, minimum
Minimum 75.
for a new structure.
75 from the stream. 100 from a lake.
Is it 100 from the lake?
I think it depends, some of them are, I think it's like 75 from non-great ponds.
Right.
And then 100 from a great pond, but
Depending on the body of water, it's between 75 and 100.
I'm
Yeah.
fairly confident this one is 75.
Okay, so this is non-conforming, it's 25 feet from the water. And so the moment you cross these lines,
Schwack it, moment you get.
you're moving that thing back 75 feet.
Which wants that.
No one wants that.
Yeah, there we go.
So I'm trying to figure it, and I'm just trying, this just seems really complicated to me. You've got up to 50% of the investment that you're gonna make in improving the property. Within, while it, part of it remains within 25 feet.
My understanding is you can go up or build out away from the lake, or you're 50.
All right,
I don't know.
I have a
You can't make it any more.
Right,
non-conforming.
that's what I'm saying.
I have a strange idea.
Mhm.
I have a strange idea.
We
Tell-
have those.
Tell me about the condition of the foundation
That's what I was getting, that's what
Right
I
now.
mentioned the foundation earlier.
places. What's
Yeah.
it look like?
It's basically just, concrete sonotube style piers. Some of them are crumbling and disintegrating. Some of the joists have rotted out, so it's, we're starting to see the corners of the house actually sink down and those piers poke up through the floor.
What is the plan that you want to do for the foundation? What do you want the foundation to be?
Yeah, ideally just, we were talking about, maybe a minor crawl space, but just a standard concrete foundation, we're not talking like basement or anything extreme, but just,
Yeah, that would be the most ideal, if not that, depending what is found when dug, we would. Alternatively put on a slab or alternatively put it back on frost posts and frame again.
All right, so here's the interesting
But
thing.
improve that.
Yeah, so here's the interesting thing, right? You can absolutely make the argument that the post and piers now. Are disintegrating, and all the cost of replacing those post and pier system is maintenance.
Yeah.
That's 100% maintenance.
Well, yeah, except that it says whenever a new and large or replacement foundation is constructed.
But it's not new and it's not larger. That's what I'm saying.
It would
It's
be a
literally,
replacement now.
it can be reconstructed if it can be substantial reconstruction as long as it falls under maintenance. So that's why I'm wondering what the condition of them are right now. It matters.
Yeah, no, I just think, new, enlarged or replaced foundation.
well, okay, define replace, I mean, if you have one pillar and you replace all the
I
others.
think that's where the interpretation of the planning board comes in.
Where is it?
Don't put it on us.
Page 14. On page 14,
Oh Under reconstruction or replacement?
No, it's under expansions. Yeah, it's under expansions. On page 14, it's the second paragraph up on the bottom, right above relocations.
Expansion of accessory structure, what's that?
No, it is section R 3A2. On page 14.
A2, yeah.
A2,
Whenever a new, enlarged, or replacement foundation is constructed under a non-conforming structure, the structure and new foundation must be placed such that the setback requirements met to the greatest practical extent as determined by the planning board or its designee. Okay, well, so that is the core of that argument. Is it a replacement or is it maintenance?
Yes.
Yeah.
The entire thing is getting replaced. Not like a component of it is getting replaced. If you're not paying out every single.
Or that
it's
it's
put in there.
It's a different
Is
design.
Is maintenance.
Right,
is
if you're
maintenance
just
upgrade.
replacing what's there, you're putting just new pillars in.
It's the
like
thing, it's
the
that's
ones that
maintenance.
deteriorate,
But if you put a full, basement in there, that's,
or a whole new frost
What
wall,
if,
they
what
didn't
if
have a
just
frost
this
wall.
leaning, what did you say, is a low shed roof or leaning, roof? What if that's just, what if they replace the piers under that, and everything else is brand new? Just trying to find a pathway forward.
Wherever a new, enlarged, or replacement foundation is constructed under a non-conforming structure. The structure and new foundation must be placed such that the setback requirement is met to the greatest practical extent as determined by the planning board.
isn't that basically saying you can't build anything?
Right.
That's what it's saying.
Sounds like that's.
Can you read it one more
You
time?
can't
please?
maintain it.
Mr. Brown?
Whenever a new, enlarged, or replacement foundation is constructed under a non-conforming structure, the structure and new foundation must be placed such that the setback requirement is met to the greatest practical extent as determined by the planning board or its designee, basing its decision on the criteria specified in section R3B relocation below. If the completed foundation does not extend beyond the exterior dimensions, the foundation does not cause the structure to be elevated by more than 3 additional feet as measured from the uphill side of the structure, it shall not be considered an expansion of the structure.
Doesn't
So,
sound like it's giving the planning board the discretion about how you with respect to the foundation.
I mean, yes, it is, and yes, it isn't. It's really hedging. Right?
Well, it doesn't discuss replacement.
To the greatest practical extent as determined by the planning board. So the planning board could say, yeah, check that building up, rip out the old falling down, piers, replace them with brand new piers, and that's the greatest extent practical. Because it says by determination of the planning board. The planning board could also say, yeah, no foundation replacements, period. If the building falls down because the foundation collapsed, tough.
Well,
Well, then we limit maintenance.
yeah, well, no, I was gonna say, I think. It's not that you can't replace the foundation, it's like, yeah, you can replace the foundation, you just have to move the building to the greatest practical extent.
No, but it does.
Well, it doesn't sound very practical to me.
I know.
Remember, this is the state talking.
It's
not us.
Must be placed such that the setback requirement is met to the greatest practical extent as determined by the planning. Greatest practical extent as determined by the planning board.
I think this is the state's way of saying that if it's non-conforming and. And the foundation goes down, then you have to move it back and it solves the problem. I don't know. It's crazy.
I mean, that's a long shot anyway. I mean, I guess
Very
I'd have to think some more about that. The problem is still the 50% because I don't see any way around the 50%. I just don't.
It would seem that the question is. Can the building where could the building? Either remain or be moved. to. What, meet the setback requirement to the greatest practical extent. There are definitely situations where. Moving the building is not, like, just isn't, if there was a property line right behind the building, like, you can't move it back.
Or
To
existing-
moving
or
it to the great
existing
practical
building.
extent is where it is. And then there's somewhere it's like, yeah, well, there's somewhere else you can put it and you gotta move it 400 feet, not 400 feet, but 250 feet.
I mean, not a lot of places on that property to move that building.
Practical.
No, they really aren't.
No.
I mean, if, I know we're not considering the stream, but if you just look at that stream, 75-foot stream boundary setback, it cuts through or fully contains
Yeah.
every structure on the property,
Yeah,
Yeah.
they did say there was a theme tonight.
right?
Beyond the septic system is the only possible location.
In the driveway.
Or turn it.
When the
yeah,
driveway-
Turn it. Who wants to do that?
But you can't get the structure out of,
100.
no, you can't get it out of.
Sure.
So then the greatest practical extent is, the greatest practical extent would be move it so it's touching the existing dwelling unit.
Way up there.
Move
Yeah.
the one that's by the lake, that's encroaching on the 25 feet. Greatest practical extent would be to move it and rebuild it,
By the barn.
touching what's labeled existing
Yeah.
dwelling on the map. That's the greatest practical extent. Greatest, because the word is greatest, not least.
Well, I'm still struggling with the term practical. I mean, is it practical to spend $2 million
It's struggling to make
to
it.
be practical? Is that practical?
Well, they leave that to us, but I would say that the guidance that we have at our disposal is not financially based.
Okay.
It's code based.
Okay.
And just silly question, the appraised value, let's say they're like, all right, we'll just do your appraisal, right?
We are being recorded, sorry.
Okay, sorry, they're gonna appraise just this building or the whole property?
House, what do you mean, take
They're
it?
gonna appraise just this single building? Or the.
For the 50%?
Yeah, or the property in its entirety,
That's not clear at all.
because, you know. This could be, I've never seen your property, but this could be $1 million property or $1.5 million property. Just wondering, like,
It says any non-conforming structure.
Yeah, my
understanding of structure
related.
Yeah, so it would be, I
I don't know. I think it's just the building.
We should appreciate that question.
The only,
yeah, the 50% of the market value of the structure before such damage.
greatest practical extent. And yeah, I believe that the tools at our disposal are not determinations of hardship for the applicant, I'm sorry to say, or financial impact for the applicant, because those, we don't have any way to, we have no metrics on which to base that. The only thing we have to determine practical extent is the code. That's it. This is why shoreline is.
I think it does leave it to the board to try and be reasonable. To try and say, like, what does
that look like?
Yeah.
But we
Is
also
it
have,
reasonable to
but we
say?
also have to be consistent.
Yeah,
Anything
right.
that might be coming down the pipe, so.
No, actually, we don't. No,
Okay,
no ruling of the planning board sets a precedent. Ever. Everything is case by case by case.
I think that the logic should be consistent, like every application is different, but you know, if you say to one person, well, we're gonna make you put it up on top of that mountain. And then you say to the other person like, no, you can just get it close to the mountain. Like, I think it would be like, well, that, why? There would have to be some like clear, like. Well, there's some reason why it's different.
Do we have criteria that we can use to differentiate maintenance from 50%?
That's what I said, I'm fine with all word made.
It does,
I mean, I would be putting a lot on the maintenance side.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah, only what's in the ordinance.
No.
Here's another question though, this is, the state has jurisdiction here ultimately.
I mean,
If we liberally interpret the language in a way that the state thinks is inappropriate, and they later come along and say, sorry, your decision is.
I guess they could appeal it, but if this is the town's ordinance, the state does say you have to
But this
adopt
is the
it.
state's language.
Well,
the state,
kinda.
the state gives us the model ordinance and says, you have to adopt this or something stricter than this,
Yes.
okay? But the town has home rule authority, which means they would have to challenge it. And take us to court, like Michael says.
Yeah.
They can't just come in and say, meh.
Right.
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
So the only thing I found in here is. Under non-conformance, it does say general repair and maintenance. This is R2B, it's on page 13. This ordinance allows without a permit, the normal upkeep and maintenance of non-conforming uses and structures, including repairs or renovations that do not involve expansion of the non-conforming use or structure. And such other changes in a non-conforming use or structure as federal, state, local building and safety codes may require. That doesn't really provide any guidance, does it?
No. But to me, I would interpret that to mean like, hey, my foundation is caving in. That's just maintenance.
Right.
I'm preserving, what I have and the value that I have in it by doing those repairs. That's my opinion, I'm sorry.
No, I don't think you're wrong.
It's otherwise it's nefarious.
Yeah, and I don't think it's intended that way. I think it's absolutely intended that way for new construction.
Right.
Yeah, new construction, you can't go within 75. Or.
But whereas, where you've got a pre-existing non-conforming structure, I would tend to interpret maintenance liberally. And greatest practical extent conservatively.
Seems reasonable.
Generally speaking.
Hmm.
Okay. Do we have anything else to add to the conversation? Because I think we're still back to our couple of paths forward here, right?
Yes, yeah.
So if we don't have anything new to add to the conversation, I think we should button this up.
And I believe you advised that we could either the board could vote on it and or we could table it. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, you always have the option, you can exercise the option to say, hey, we'd like to request we're gonna come back and amend
Yeah.
we're gonna come back and amend the application. We actually have that written in the ordinance somewhere, I don't know where, at which point you just tell us that right now, and we would say, okay, we're gonna table this until we get an amended
Yeah.
application.
And did I hear correctly or incorrectly that if DEP said to us, yeah, no, you can't get any closer, or if they said to us, yeah, okay, we'll let you get 50 feet to the stream. If we had that exact determination,
Could that
Yeah.
impact the board's decision?
would the board be able to consider that decision in terms of their
The greatest practical extent.
right part?
So I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but I'm.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
it's you're helping, yes, yeah,
That would absolutely influence,
okay,
100%.
okay,
I can't say that it would influence in a way that would lead to an approval,
understand.
but I can say that it would absolutely influence because DEP has put eyeballs on it. They've made a determination about what that stream is, what the setback is. You got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It would seem impractical to come up with a solution, like, say that this location is the greatest practical extent when you know very well DP is not going to allow to build it.
Right.
It doesn't seem like a practical solution, so that,
Where if they make a yeah, I would think in this particular situation, which is not always the case, but, if you had some sort of. You could file a permit with DEP, honestly.
Or some kind of review.
Or, yeah, and you have something that you include with the amended application for us. That would potentially demonstrate greatest practical extent.
Yep.
And
So,
influence the application that way.
so we really appreciate the board's time and energy on this tonight. We're gonna ask that you table it.
Okay, all right,
Thanks
great.
very much.
Good, well, do I have a motion then to table this application?
So moved.
Second, thank you, Lucas.
Scott,
Lucas, all right. Any further discussion about the application tonight? Seeing none, all in favor of tabling the application? All right. Yes, all right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much. Shortly into the fun one. All right. All right, so moving on to other items, 5A public comment. Does anyone have any public comments?
That's me.
Great, come on up.
So it's not like specifically asking for something, just kind of bringing something to your guys' attention. Been talking with Michael here for a little bit.
Silas.
Yeah, I'm Silas. Yeah.
Can we in person?
Yes, nice to meet you. I own 31 Bunker Hill Road in Newcastle. It's in the D1.
You are
Sorry, I'm Silas Hatch.
Silas Hatch.
Yep. Yeah.
From
Yeah, I live in Scarborough, but all this place. So just been doing some poking around. It's D1 rural zoning, kind of on further look through that. It looks like there's some allowances for multi-unit court on some of those larger parcels that are along the lake. You know, I'm aware specifically because there's also some larger parcels adjacent to me that I could see that type of development happening, and it's kind of urging you guys to maybe reconsider that use in that zone, specifically kind of adjacent to the lake as appropriate. So I mean, based on my interpretation of zoning, it looks like you could probably put 20 units in some of these larger parcels, and I'm not sure that's probably appropriate or would be wanted by most people in the area. So
And yeah, let me give a little context and
Yeah.
make a little bit of structure. You
Sure.
let me know if this is not,
yeah.
because Silas and I have had some conversations about a concern of overdevelopment,
Right.
specifically on properties, I guess it's Bunker Hill Road, but along
The west side of Damerscott.
the west side of Damerscott Lake.
Yeah.
And I think that what you're moving towards, and possibly, obviously you have to make the request, but like trying to test the water maybe of an ordinance amendment to limit some development potential in that area.
High
of, like,
density
the watershed,
development.
of Damerscott Lake is how
Yeah, I think multi-unit court is a good ordinance. It's like a PUD style development. I think there's a lot of use cases where that makes sense in other areas. Because you conserve, you're increasing density, increasing housing, but preserving open space. I think that's a good thing in general in planning. However, 20, 30, 40 units along the lake with all that additional traffic and stress on the watershed, I think is probably not appropriate, not wanted by the majority of people in that area. So I would just propose maybe it's an overlay zone along the east side of the lake, or maybe it's a new zone in general that just kind of strips out that multi-unit court allowance in that area. And I think it'd be great to maybe go a step further, but that would be the one first step there.
Yeah.
there impending.
There
Is anyone?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm coming, I'm obviously financially invested in the area, right? Own a property, not trying to hide that at all, right? I do know the neighbor adjacent to me is an older fellow from Massachusetts who plans on selling his 40 acres to the highest bidder and has made mention of, some local developers, realtors kind of poking at that and knowing that he could do some high density there. So yeah, obviously I'd be really frustrated if that happened, but I think there'd be a lot of people, in the general area that would be pretty upset, and kind of talking to general people in the area. I think a lot of people don't understand that kind of density is allowed under current zoning in that area. So
After two.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think that it's a invalid concern. The issue that I raised and shared with you is like, well, the direction that I provided was to talk to town manager, go to the select board.
Yeah.
I think it's a question of for me, of resources and priorities of what is the town.
prioritizing.
Yeah, basically, what's the town working on? What obviously, if we had all the resources and time and money, town would fix all the problems now. And whether there's a problem, I don't know. That's also for the kind of the community to have that conversation, but have that conversation. And so that's where I think the question is like, is this something that maybe how high of a priority should it be to have that conversation and look at I don't know, down zoning or whatever you want, altering the zoning to prevent that kind of development.
Right.
That's, I think, is the question. And I expressed that I wasn't here during the comp plan process and zoning process. But my sense is that residents, there are certainly at least some residents who would push back on any kind of limits in the rural district. More than whatever is that. I mean, there are plenty of people who are like, why do you have zoning? Let whatever happen. So that's where I'm like, I'm not gonna recommend to the select board, planning board, or anybody that this is a amendment that we need to pursue, but you all absolutely can.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, I'm looking at it from a water quality standpoint, right? I mean, that section of southern and central part of the lake has significant water quality issues at this point. There is no public wastewater opportunities here. Like, you're not gonna run sewer up here, right? So it's gonna be some type of septic system in here. I mean, putting high density in this area just doesn't seem appropriate, in my opinion.
So let me temper the narrative you're spinning with this a little dose of code reality. If you propose to do a multi-unit court and you want to put up more than 2 structures, you're gonna trigger subdivision. Period, end of story.
Yeah.
Subdivision is very concerned with things like wastewater control, infrastructure, including septic.
Yeah.
Particularly in regards to groundwater, water quality, all of those things.
Phosphorus
Loading and lakes, and yes, absolutely. So
yeah, it'd be a challenge.
Having the multi-unit court available as a development tool for rural does not automatically allow people to drop 40 units with no oversight.
For sure. Yeah.
There's a strict oversight in subdivision that gives the planning board considerably more latitude than the core zoning code itself does in determining how those criteria are met.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest challenges to the idea of putting even 5 units together, even 4 units together as a multi-unit court in a district or on a parcel that is not serviced by municipal wastewater and water is already such an insane challenge.
Right.
That I'm not trying to tell you that it can't happen. What
Yeah.
I'm telling you is that it's It's practically very difficult.
Okay.
The reason this was included as a potential development tool was, as Michael suggested, part of the conversation that the town was having about things that they wanted to have available as tools. And this was when tiny houses were becoming very trendy. And a lot of people said, boy, it'd be really nice to be able to build a couple of tiny houses for my kids in a little tiny village on a piece of property. And maybe they share, a septic and a well, and which is allowable under Maine law. But once you pass, oh my God, you pass that third dwelling unit on a septic system, all of a sudden the requirements go like through the roof.
And like, yeah, just to be clear, I don't have an issue with multi-unit court as a zoning tool or as a building tool in that rural. I'm questioning its appropriateness that close to the lake.
Sure, I'm just giving you the background.
Yeah.
And ultimately, none of us can answer that question. The public answers that question.
Yeah.
But the reason it was included was because people really did like the idea of being able to build these small little tiny house, clusters for their kids or for visiting relatives or things like that.
Yeah. We see. I'm down in Scarborough area. I'm working in commercial real estate development. We see a lot of PUD style, condo style,
Totally.
single family development. It's very popular right now.
Yep.
So.
Yep. I mean, without I'll be blunt. I appreciate your concern, but without some sort of real and appreciable pressure from a development project or 2 or 3, for example, we had some development pressure around the idea of solar. What am I trying to say?
Farms.
Solar farms, right? I think we got what, 3 or 4 proposals for solar farms within 6 months. I mean, we're talking about was solar farms for like 6 months. It was ridiculous. And so we said, well, we should really actually think about this. So with the lack of that, I appreciate the thoughtfulness and the concern, but I don't see it rising to the level of let's go out and change the ordinance.
Yeah, I'm
to be honest with you,
Yeah.
no one in the entire town of Newcastle, regardless of district, has availed themselves of building a multi-unit court
Okay.
at all.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'd love to see one go up.
Yeah.
So that we could have a little bit of, but we'd review it obviously, and we'd be able to see how well it went. And then it'd be an appropriate time to go, does this work here? Does this not work here? And those are questions that we as a planning board ask ourselves after almost every review that we do. But without the pressure, without the review in front of us, without, a whole lot of interest in multi-unit courts in rural areas, it's hard to make the case to say this needs to go.
Okay.
up
I
the
mean,
chain.
this where shorefront's obviously more valuable than the majority of other stuff, right? This is where you're probably going to see it pop up first, theoretically, right? Because there's multiple large parcels along the lake right there, right? And it's not necessarily just septic and water, it's lake traffic and other impacts that could have, right?
Sure.
So I mean, if it's going to happen anywhere, that's where it's going to be most valuable to happen.
Well, an argument could also be made, just the flip side of the coin, like devil's advocate for you.
Yeah.
That was the traditional form of development on the lakefront.
Sure.
Those small cottages and clusters on the lakefront, they're present all the way up.
Yeah.
I mean, you go down Austin Road, go down, any of those little spur roads as you're going up towards Bunker Hill, and you'll find 4 or 5 little, cottages that were seasonal cottages served by one driveway, all within, 250 feet circle of each other. They're looking in their windows.
Yeah.
So I think we need more evidence that it's a major concern to bring it up, but I really do appreciate you thinking about it.
Okay.
It's actually an interesting thing because the code itself is based on hypotheticals. Okay. It is.
So,
But
we have to act on real things. We can't,
For review purposes.
right,
Right.
we can't act on any hypo, well, what happens if an asteroid hits this field over? Yeah,
Right.
so we have to figure out the hypotheticals that we want to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, when the code was built and, you look at like building the concepts and the districts around the idea of, essentially, do you want to preserve that area? Do you want to enhance that area? Do you want to transform that area? It's really one of those three things, right? So, there are areas of town that were coded aspirationally. There are other areas of town that were coded from the mindset of protectionist. And that's going to be the case no matter what district you're talking about or what standards you're talking about. And so that was all rolled in through all those community conversations, right? Through the comp plan and the new code. But from our perspective, like, you're not wrong. We have to review against what's written. And we can make the argument that this is a major concern, but generally speaking, what we've been bringing, like, floating to the top in terms of major concerns is when we find like true conflicts within the code itself, or we find something that, the interpretation was either off, misleading, incomplete. Those things really need to be addressed. And then beyond that, I would say, yeah, if you and 20 of your neighbors come in and go, hey, we really don't like this, and we're seeing the pressure building, like, we go, oh, okay, let's do something about it.
Yeah, I've been involved in some of those projects where, the plan's already been submitted. So 321 Lincoln Street in Saco.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with that project, I represented the buyer on that,
Okay.
or the seller on that, and Lonnie Graver's the developer on that. That was a by right deal. So zoning was in place to allow what Lonnie wanted there, and it got, lawsuits for multiple years up to the state. So my argument back to you would be like, maybe if we don't think high density development along the shorefront is appropriate in conjunction, in line with where you want to see high density other places, maybe it's something to look at. Is kind of my point, right? And not just say, hey, let's wait for somebody to throw a big plan on our board, and then when we say, hey, we actually don't think this is right, getting a huge lawsuit over it being a by right deal, right? That's kind of my thought process.
You can argue it both ways, and I see your perspective, absolutely, and it's worthwhile. But I think we did a lot of that work and a lot of that style of thinking when we wrote the plan.
The comp plan. Yeah.
Both, and the code.
Yeah.
And I think too, if you don't want to trigger a subdivision, then you can have a big lot of land, but if you don't want to trigger subdivision, it's gonna be a long time developing that into a lot of houses.
Yeah,
Wait every 5 years to sell.
100%. Yeah, I think on a site like this where you've got some older gentleman who just wants to sell the highest bidder, you're gonna have a developer that's gonna say, yeah, I'm gonna bring in Sebago Technics, we're gonna go through subdivision, we're gonna blow this thing out, right? I mean, guys aren't gonna be afraid of going through subdivision on a 40-acre piece with 600 feet of frontage, right? So,
And I think that's like fair, valid, and I think this is the conversation isn't. I think it's, at least for me, like in the town office, we get our direction, kind of like what's in the comp plan, what is the community saying, what are the issues, what's the select board saying, these are the issues to address. And that's where it's like, it's not about, is this an issue, is it not an issue? Should we have the conversation? Should we not have the conversation? I think it's about what do we focus on? And if like you said, like if you and 20 other 30 other people start saying like we need to really address this, then it's like, okay, well,
yeah,
we work with people like,
Yeah, and I mean, I
do
even
that.
push back against the idea that high density isn't what we want. Because if you read the comp plan,
I think high density is absolutely what we want, but you want it in smart growth areas, which are downtown, walkable with public services. I studied.
don't disagree with you at all.
Yeah, I think the reason you don't have 20 people knocking on your door about this issue is because there aren't so many people that read through the zoning, right?
Oh, hell no.
Yeah.
No.
So I don't think a lot of people, I think if I knocked on 20 of my neighbors' doors and said, hey, did you know that you can do a multi-unit court on a lot of these acres? They'd be like, oh crap, that's probably not what we want to see, right? I mean, I think.
Depends on how you put it to them.
Yeah.
Right?
How would we put it to them if somebody?
Well, if you went and you said, this developer is gonna put 40 units next door to you. And it's allowed by the code. That's a different conversation than, hey, did you know that your kids that are all struggling, you could build little tiny houses here and have them in a little configuration, and
It's well, I mean, I don't know. It's just, yeah, I think
it all depends on how you present it.
Sure.
Because it's
Yeah.
one tool that can be used different ways,
Yeah, and
as most zoning tools are.
And again, my argument's not to strip multi-unit court from the D1 zoning. It's to potentially put a buffer zone or some type of overlay district or something along the, shorefront there. It's not
That prohibits it.
Yeah, that prohibits it. You can either take out multi-unit court or it talks about, different zoning density regs along the in
Well,
areas that are, water areas are stressed, right?
You are actually playing my playbook when you're talking about stratification of rural districts, because we only have one.
Sure.
And there are more than one, but that is a much bigger conversation.
Okay.
That is a big conversation.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll keep thinking about it. I mean, I think we should keep thinking about it as always. We got a big list of things that we always,
I mean, yeah, what would be like
rehash.
to put forward an overlay district that's basically 1,000 feet from Damascotta Lake? I mean, what would be how hard would that be?
Well, you mean like, what's the process? Like, if
Yeah, yeah, like I gotta get 20 neighbors to say, hey, yeah, maybe,
I
yeah.
think it depends on who you talk to and who owns the land and who benefits from that
Sure.
and who doesn't, and I think you get a different attitude depending on. I'm gonna look at it differently because I don't own that property, than if I
Right.
owned it, I might look differently.
100%. Yeah, and
You
I
know,
would
and I feel like, I can only control what I own,
sure.
and I can't control what my neighbors do totally, but I understand, but what also is to stop somebody from buying that 40 acres, even with that overlay, or buy the land behind it. And put one right away down to the water, and
Yeah.
let everybody that has all these houses up here have access to it. Has that really, have we
Yeah.
really solved the problem?
You've, slowed it down and put some barriers up, but I mean, it's a pretty stressed watershed, right? So I think like in general, I hear what you're saying, and I realize that I'm being a NIMBY right now, 100%. And that's, I work in an industry where that's not looked on favorably. However, I think if you took a poll of people that enjoyed the lake and were on the lake and had, stock in the lake, they would want to see less development, not more development. And nobody wants to see a large multiplex coming in with 50 other boats on the water, right? There's a few parcels I think here that
Yeah, multiplex is a strong word, because we're not allowing mixed use buildings and we're not allowing
Yeah.
multi-unit buildings.
Okay. Yeah.
So
large subdivisions.
subdivisions.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I guess it doesn't sound like you guys are.
I think at the moment, I just don't see, I don't see the need, and I don't see the overarching argument, other than, no offense, but your NIMBY argument.
100%. Yeah. No.
And no offense, but
Yeah.
like, one NIMBY argument from one person doesn't carry a whole lot of weight.
Yeah.
In my mind.
Okay. Yeah.
Especially since when you consider the comp plan and the code that we painstakingly went through years to build, which is the opposite. It is, yes, in my backyard. That is the bent of it.
I spend my days trying to force development in Southern Maine, so I completely agree, and I'm all about smart growth.
Yeah, we are like, hey, we need to grow the tax base in Newcastle.
100%. I
We
think
gotta grow
there's
that.
good appropriate places to do it and inappropriate places to do it. And that's my argument here, right? So
I gotcha.
it's not I am pro growth to the max, but I don't think the housing that you guys are trying to create in this town are going to be created along Damascotta Lake, right? That's not the housing that we're really pushing for.
Oh, we've encouraged growth in the village district, and we're gonna do more to encourage growth in the village district. We're doing a lot towards that.
Yep.
Still aren't reaping the rewards of, but the timeline on that kind of thing for a small town like this, not in southern Maine, north of Brunswick, it's 20 years.
Yeah, that's all another discussion. So okay, yeah,
I appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
And great thoughts. I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning going, oh my God.
Yeah.
But I don't feel that way right now.
appreciate it.
Thank you very much. All right. Let's head back to I've lost it. I've got so many tabs going on. Other items. Board discussion.
If there's anything you want to discuss.
We've been here for 2 hours. Seeing nothing, do you have anything for the planners report?
No, nothing I can think of. So.
Just before I close the meeting, based on his comments, does anyone feel differently? Because I kind of ran roughshod over that conversation.
No, I feel very much this.
Conflict, that conflict, you know, that whole thing. So
Okay.
I don't know how that goes. I'm new to the board, but.
You can have an opinion, you're a board.
No,
chair.
it's not an opinion, I have a conflict of interest.
Oh, well, then, yeah.
Well, and I feel very strongly that, I feel the same way that he probably feels about the lake. I feel that way about the fields in North
Yeah.
Newcastle.
Right.
That's why I ended up being on the.
Yeah.
In the beginning, because I didn't like the way I was hearing things were going, but the bottom line is, you know, the land is the land and you can only control really what you own.
Right.
And if you really wanna control what's around you, then you have two choices. You either live with what's going on or you
Well,
buy
and
what's around
the
you.
property owner has rights as well.
They absolutely do.
And it, you know, it may be in the interest of somebody who has 40 acres to get the best value they can for their property. So we have to balance that stuff. You know, and it's still hypothetical. I'm thinking, you know, until you got something that. You know, there's all sorts of things we could come up with and say, what if? Well. You gotta put something real in front of us.
Well, and I mean, the other thing, we're still on camera, and I will say this on camera. I say too much on camera. I do. But I'm gonna say this
I probably do
anyway.
too, so.
There are types of development projects, and there will be types of development projects that stress our code. But right now, that is the problem that we want to have. We want that problem. If we have to fix things, we will fix them, but at the moment, we're not seeing an overwhelming amount of growth in town that would require us to put on the brakes. Am I wrong?
No, I think that's kind of where I'm at. I think the town's focus, I think rightfully so, is urging appropriate development in the downtown where services are, where utilities are, and not that. There's not, I don't think there's quite the development pressure that we need to be looking to tamp things down. I do think that there's plenty of areas in the rural district, including possibly this one, that you might want to be more conservative with, but I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem we have right now is not enough housing is getting built overall, rather than too much housing is getting built. So that's where, like, if we have to pick and prioritize, and
Well,
so
all the studies that have been done in the past 5 years have been pointing at the same problem, which is there's no possible way we can build enough housing to support the population for the next 30 years. So, yeah, housing is a big priority. All right, the time is 8:32. Without objection, I'm going to say meeting adjourned. Any objections? None? Meeting adjourned.